Imagine you are driving past a military base and see its name on the welcome sign, just a word, right? But what if that name ignited a nationwide controversy, sparked lawsuits, and cost taxpayers tens of millions of dollars? Welcome to the saga of Fort Bragg, now known for a brief moment as Fort Liberty, where a simple act of renaming has snowballed into one of the most heated and expensive identity debates in modern American history. What is truly at stake when a military base changes its name? Is it just a matter of signs and paperwork, or does it cut to the very heart of American memory, race relations, and even military strength? The answer, as you will see, is both more complicated and more consequential than most people realize. To understand how we got here, let's travel back in time. For more than 100 years, sprawling Army installations across the southern United States, like Fort Bragg in North Carolina, have borne the names of generals who fought for the Confederacy. These bases are not small outposts. Fort Bragg alone covers more than 250 square miles, larger than many American cities, and supports a population of over 52,000 active-duty soldiers, making it one of the largest military bases in the world by population. It is the home of storied units like the 82nd Airborne Division and the Green Berets. But few realize that the names given to these posts were not chosen in the aftermath of the Civil War. In fact, most were selected in the early 20th century and, in many cases, during the height of opposition to the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s. According to Chandra Manning, a respected history professor at Georgetown University, these names were political statements. She explains, "Base names became symbols of resistance to desegregation. They were never neutral." The act of naming a base after a Confederate general was not about commemorating military prowess. It was, for many, a coded message about who belonged in the American story and who did not. These decisions, often made by Army commanders in consultation with local politicians, sent a message to Black Americans and other minorities. The legacy of the Confederacy still had a seat at the table. Fast forward to the summer of 2023. The United States was in the midst of a renewed push for racial justice, following widespread protests that swept the nation after several high-profile incidents of police violence. Responding to public pressure and recommendations from a bipartisan commission, the Biden administration ordered the renaming of 9 Army bases that honored Confederate leaders. Fort Bragg became Fort Liberty, at a cost of more than $6 million for that single installation. Nationwide, the total cost of the renaming process for all 9 bases reached nearly $40 million. This expense covered everything from changing road signs and stationery to updating the insignia on hundreds of thousands of uniforms and repainting countless military vehicles. Supporters of the change argued that the cost was justified. For many minority service members, walking through gates named after generals who fought to preserve slavery was a daily reminder of exclusion. Retired Sergeant First Class Angela Brown, who served at Fort Bragg for over a decade, described the renaming as a long overdue step toward making everyone feel like they belong in the Army family. Critics, however, were incensed. Some saw the move as an attack on Southern heritage and a dangerous precedent of erasing history. Others, including local business owners in towns like Fayetteville, North Carolina, worried about the economic fallout. For these communities, the base's name is woven into everything, from local branding and tourism campaigns to the names of schools, streets, and small businesses. Changing it meant not just new signs, but a new identity. Yet, as the dust began to settle, a new chapter unfolded. In early 2024, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, a key figure in the current Republican administration, announced that Fort Liberty would revert to being called Fort Bragg. But this time, the official story was different. The base would honor not the Confederate General Braxton Bragg, but a World War II hero named Roland L. Bragg, a decorated paratrooper who served in the European theater. This creative maneuver, according to legal scholars such as Senator Jack Reed, technically complied with existing laws while circumventing the spirit of the renaming commission's work. The move was quickly followed by promises from President Donald Trump, who, at a raucous rally on the base, declared that all bases renamed under the previous administration would have their original names restored. Trump told the crowd, "We won a lot of battles from these forts. I'm very superstitious. It's no time to change." For many in attendance, this was a return to tradition. For others, it was a slap in the face. The legal and political fallout was immediate. The NAACP, joined by a coalition of civil rights organizations and veteran groups, filed lawsuits arguing that restoring the old names forced minority students and service members to publicly endorse a legacy of racial oppression. Attorney Ashley Joyner Chavous, representing the plaintiffs, stated, "Restoring Confederate names compels minorities to accept inequality. It is a denial of free speech and equal protection." The lawsuits are winding their way through the lower courts, but most experts agree that the Supreme Court will eventually have to weigh in. Should the highest court rule in favor of restoring the original names, the implications could extend far beyond military bases, potentially affecting the naming of schools, monuments, and even public streets across the country. What about the economic impact? The costs are staggering and growing. The initial renaming of 9 Army bases cost nearly $40 million, with Fort Bragg's transition to Fort Liberty alone accounting for over $6 million in expenses. If the legal wrangling continues and bases are renamed, unrenamed, and renamed again, some analysts project that the cumulative costs could reach into the hundreds of millions, or even billions, of taxpayer dollars. These funds come at a time when the military is already facing budget pressures from rising personnel costs and global security threats. The uncertainty is not just financial. Recruitment officers report that the ongoing controversy is hurting their efforts to attract new talent. Young Americans considering a career in the armed forces are increasingly asking tough questions about the values the military represents. As one Green Beret, quoted in The Atlantic, put it, "How can we talk about honor and tradition if those words keep changing?" This sense of whiplash is contributing to a broader decline in morale, with some units reporting higher rates of attrition and lower re-enlistment numbers since the naming debate reignited. The ripple effects extend into the civilian world as well. Towns like Fayetteville, which depend on the base for jobs and economic activity, face real risks. Some business owners worry that the constant upheaval will deter new investment and drive away potential residents who value stability and diversity. Others see opportunity, a chance to rebrand their communities as inclusive, forward-looking places that welcome all Americans. As Chandra Manning notes, changing a name is a chance to tell a different story and to invite people who never felt welcome before. But the debate is not just about economics, law, or military tradition. It is fundamentally about how a nation remembers its past and who gets to decide what that memory looks like. Should the United States continue to honor figures who fought against the Union and for the preservation of slavery, or is it time to recognize new heroes who reflect the country's diversity and shared values? This question is playing out not only on military bases, but in school curricula, public monuments, and even state flags. Consider the historical parallels. The United States has grappled with the meaning of public symbols before. In the aftermath of the Civil Rights Movement, many Southern cities began to rename streets and schools that once honored Confederate leaders. In some cases, local resistance was fierce, with lawsuits and even acts of vandalism. Yet, over time, new generations have grown up with different symbols. Martin Luther King Jr. boulevards, for instance, now exist in dozens of cities nationwide. These changes did not erase history, but they did signal a shift in whose stories are told. The military, as an institution, occupies a unique place in this debate. Unlike city governments or school boards, the Army is both a symbol of national unity and a highly diverse organization. Today, nearly half of all new Army recruits are people of color, and more than 1 in 6 soldiers are women. For these service members, the names of the places where they live, train, and sometimes risk their lives are more than just words. They are statements about belonging, respect, and recognition. So, what might happen next? If the Supreme Court upholds the restoration of the original names, it could embolden state governments to push back against federal efforts to promote diversity, not just in the military, but in other arenas as well. Legal scholars warn that such a ruling could open the floodgates to lawsuits challenging everything from classroom textbooks to the names of public parks. The financial burden on taxpayers would likely increase, as cities and states fight protracted legal battles over symbols and signage. On the other hand, if the Supreme Court sides with the current names, like Fort Liberty, it could mark a turning point in the nation's ongoing reckoning with its past. But even this outcome carries risks. Some military leaders warn that the constant uncertainty is undermining the very cohesion and esprit de corps that bases like Fort Bragg have long fostered. As Lieutenant General Gregory Anderson argues, we need names that everyone can be proud of, not just a select few. The story is also a case study in the power of legal loopholes. By renaming bases after new honorees with nearly identical names, Secretary Hegseth has found a way to sidestep the intent of Congress and the recommendations of the Bipartisan Naming Commission. Senator Jack Reed, a leading voice on the Senate Armed Services Committee, has publicly criticized this approach, calling it a cynical end run around justice. Yet, as the law is currently written, Hegseth's move is legal, a reminder that the details of legislation matter, and that those in power will exploit every inch of gray area to achieve their goals. For everyday Americans, this drama is more than a distant headline. If you are a service member or a military family, the name on your home address might shape your sense of identity and pride. For local business owners, the outcome of these debates could mean the difference between a bustling Main Street and boarded-up storefronts. And for students and teachers, the names on school buildings and textbooks are daily reminders of the stories a nation chooses to celebrate or to forget. Even if you have never set foot on a military base, there are important lessons here about the intersection of history, law, and economics. Watch closely how leaders talk about tradition and change. Notice the legal tactics deployed as each side tries to claim the moral high ground. These same strategies will likely appear in future battles over public symbols, university campuses, and beyond. And remember, when lawmakers leave loopholes, those who want to keep things as they are, or change them dramatically, will find creative ways to get what they want. Here's a secret fact that might surprise you. Despite all the controversy, not a single base originally named for a Confederate general was ever officially recognized by an act of Congress. The Army assigned these names, often at the urging of local politicians who wanted to curry favor with their constituents. Legally, this means that the story of America's military base names is still being written, and every citizen has a say in what comes next. So, what do you think? Is it time to leave history alone, or should the country seize this moment to write a new chapter? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe for more deep dives into the intersection of global economics and technology, and share this video if you found it enlightening. The story of Fort Bragg, Fort Liberty, and the names we give our most important places is far from over.